From the bright lights of WrestleMania to wrestling in front of high school gyms, here's what happened to every WWE wrestler who fell off. Kicking off our list with none other than the rated R superstar, Edge. Adam Copeland spent over a decade becoming one of the most decorated performers in wrestling history, an 11-time world champion, a Royal Rumble winner, the first ever Money in the Bank holder, and a Hall of Famer. When a series of neck injuries forced him into retirement in 2011, it felt like a tragedy. But then, in January 2020, he came back at the Royal Rumble and everything felt right. His return run had some genuinely great moments, including a feud with Randy Orton, a triple threat Mania main event, and the Seth Rollins feud. But after the feud with Rollins, his run started to feel aimless. The crowd still loved him, but creative never quite matched his stature. When his contract expired in September 2023, Edge departed after a final match in his hometown of Toronto. Weeks later, he debuted in AEW as Adam Copeland. He won the TNT Championship and had a shot at the world title, but you can't escape the feeling that his best work is behind him. His time in AEW has been marked by injuries, mid-card feuds, and overall, the run hasn't been as groundbreaking as Tony Khan would have hoped for. Cope openly admitted he's near the end, hinting his retirement match may come at WrestleDream 2026 in Toronto. While Edge didn't have the worst downfall on this list, but for someone of his stature who's a former world champion and one of WWE's top guys during the Ruthless Aggression era, his run in AEW has done more harm to his legacy than good. Many fans can't help but wonder if Edge should have stayed retired after his match versus Sheamus. But I guess how Tony Khan handles his retirement will determine the final verdict on his AEW run. However, Edge isn't the only ex-WWE wrestler who joined AEW. In 2014, Paige became the youngest Divas champion in history at just 21 years old. The punk rock aesthetic, the aggressive style, the authentic charisma. She felt like the future of the women's division before the women's revolution had even begun. But then, injuries derailed everything. A neck injury suffered during a tag match left her medically uncleared to compete, and she lingered in a managerial role on SmackDown as general manager before leaving the company entirely in 2022. All Elite Wrestling seemed like the perfect fresh start after she was cleared to wrestle. She debuted in 2022 and had a brief feud with Britt Baker. After that, she became the leader of the Outcasts with Toni Storm and Ruby Soho. Then came the moment that marked the peak of her AEW run. At All in 2023, in front of her home crowd at Wembley Stadium, Saraya won the Women's World Championship. It was emotional. It was a feel-good moment, but it also felt more like a formality for the hometown pop rather than something she earned. The title reign lasted just around 40 days before she dropped the belt to Hikaru Shida. From there, Saraya never recovered any real momentum. Feuds went nowhere. The Outcasts split. By October 2024, she made her final AEW appearance and then simply wasn't on TV anymore. A hiatus announcement followed in November, and by March 2025, she was officially gone from the company. Since her exit, she's been spotted training and has said she's open to a WWE return, but reports suggest the door isn't exactly wide open. Someone who was once the most exciting woman in the entire industry is watching the women's revolution march forward without her. For nearly 2 decades, Dolph Ziggler was the most frustrating kind of talent. Someone everyone knew was exceptional, but who the company seemingly never fully trusted. 6 Intercontinental Championship reigns, 2 World Heavyweight Championship reigns, a Money in the Bank cash-in, a reputation as the guy who could make anyone look like a star. And yet main event pushes always fizzled out. Big victories never came when they mattered most. He became synonymous with the word almost. When WWE released him in September 2023 after a 19-year run, the assumption among fans was that this was finally the moment. No creative restrictions, no glass ceilings, All Elite Wrestling seemed like the obvious landing spot, a place where he could rebuild his brand value and show off his full potential. Except it never happened. He opted instead for TNA, debuting under his real name, Nick Nemeth. He became TNA World Champion in 2024. He and his brother Ryan won the tag titles. He even got a one-off WWE return in 2025 for John Cena's retirement tournament. But here's the thing though. TNA, however much it's grown, is not the platform Dolph Ziggler was built for. He should have been one of the biggest names in the wrestling world today, main eventing All In and putting on classics against guys like Kenny Omega and Will Ospreay. Instead, he's wrestling in a promotion most fans barely know still exists. But at least Ziggler has stayed out of legal trouble so far, unlike the next wrestler on our list. Ted Jr. arrived in WWE with everything working in his favor. He was the son of the $1 Million Man, he had a mentor in Randy Orton, and when he won the tag team championships with Cody Rhodes, it seemed like only a matter of time before he broke out as a singles star. But once Legacy dissolved, it became clear that Ted Jr. lacked the it factor needed to be a main event star. When his contract expired in September 2013, he chose not to renew, walking away at just 31 and citing mental health struggles. In many ways, that honesty was admirable, but what followed wasn't. He launched a nonprofit and worked with his father's ministry, helping the underprivileged. It seemed like a genuinely good chapter. But then, in 2022, the Mississippi Department of Human Services sued their family, alleging they had squandered over $20 million from federal welfare funds meant for some of America's poorest families. In April 2023, Ted Jr. was arrested on 13 federal counts, including wire fraud, money laundering, and theft. His trial began in January 2026. His brother Brett has already pleaded guilty. If convicted on all counts, Ted Jr. faces up to 45 years in prison. Whatever his WWE legacy could have been, it's now permanently overshadowed by one of the darkest stories in wrestling history. But not all former wrestlers go to jail. Some build a personal prison that's far worse. In 2012, WWE thought they had their next big monster. Ryback was booked like an unstoppable machine, running through opponents in squash matches while the crowd ate it up. By October 2012, he was in a WWE Championship match against CM Punk inside Hell in a Cell. The stars seemed to be aligning. It felt like this was Ryback's night, but he didn't win. And that's where things started to unravel. Vince kept positioning him in title programs, but he kept coming up short. A forgettable tag run with Curtis Axel, a Paul Heyman association that fizzled, a WrestleMania match against Mark Henry where he lost. The pattern was unmistakable. Every time Vince had the chance to pull the trigger on making him a top star, he didn't. By 2015, he finally won the Intercontinental Championship, but the moment had long passed. He left WWE in 2016, citing creative frustrations and inequity in pay between part-timers and full-time talent. But what followed took things from bad to worse. Ryback went scorched earth on social media, routinely attacking Vince and Triple H on Twitter. He wrestled briefly on the indie circuit before stopping altogether in 2018, citing serious spinal injuries and the complete loss of cartilage in his shoulder. He's since acknowledged that his career is almost certainly over, and his Twitter polls often see fans voicing their request for him to stay retired. Today, Ryback runs a YouTube channel, posting food reviews and mukbangs, and has largely been blacklisted from the wrestling industry. The talent was there, but the ego was higher. And somewhere between the mismanaged push and self-inflicted social media war, the big guy's career quietly starved. But while Ryback never won a world championship, let's talk about a legend who went from bright lights and world titles to obscurity. If you grew up watching wrestling during the Ruthless Aggression era, Rob Van Dam was unlike anything else on the card. The kicks, the aerial moves, the charisma. He was genuinely one of a kind. When ECW folded and he came to WWE, he quickly became one of the most popular performers on the roster despite never truly being handed the ball. That changed at One Night Stand 2006 when RVD pinned John Cena for the WWE Championship in front of a rabid crowd. And just days later, Paul Heyman personally handed him the reactivated ECW World Heavyweight Championship, making him the only man in history to simultaneously hold both titles. It was the peak of his run in wrestling. Then, just 3 weeks into his reign, he got pulled over for speeding on a road trip and was found with 18 grams of marijuana. Vince stripped him of both titles within 48 hours and suspended him for 30 days. He'd go on to have brief returns to the company and a solid run in TNA where he won the World Heavyweight Championship in 2010, but he never got back to his prime. The truth is, RVD was his own biggest obstacle. The arrest wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a career-long pattern of not fully committing to the top of the card. In his own words, he gave WWE plenty of chances not to push him, and eventually sabotaged the one time they did. Had he stayed clean and focused during the height of his 2006 push, we might be talking about him as one of the greatest stars of the era. Instead, he remains a forgotten legend while his peers like Randy Orton and John Cena went on to become megastars. But while RVD tasted championship gold, this next wrestler sabotaged her career before reaching her peak. Tegan Nox was a fan favorite from the moment she arrived in NXT. But then the injuries started. She tore her ACL before her first big tournament, She tore it again during her quarterfinal match against Rhea Ripley at the 2018 Mae Young Classic. She tore it a third time in 2020 during rehab. When she finally got healthy and got her shot on the main roster in 2021, the timing was off. She was sent up to SmackDown, teamed with Shotzi, had a couple of fun moments, then was released before she ever got a real chance to establish herself. WWE brought her back in 2022 for a second run, but it followed the same pattern. Occasional TV time, no real momentum, and then she was released again in November 2024. Post-WWE, the story got messier. In October 2025, she and her partner Miranda Elise showed up on AEW Collision looking for a spot on the women's roster. 2 weeks later, they were booked to lose a match against Anna Jay and Tay Mello. And instead of going through with it, they walked out of the show less than an hour before it went live on TV. People inside the company who had gone to bat for her felt burned. The wrestling world largely called it a career-defining mistake. Dave Meltzer reported she likely wouldn't be booked by AEW again, and voices on the independent scene noted it was unlikely to help her get work elsewhere either. She's talked about retiring by 2026. Whether that happens or not, the walkout cemented a narrative no one wanted for her. But while Tegan sabotaged her own career, this next wrestler on our list has one of the most tragic stories in wrestling. As part of the Undisputed era, alongside Adam Cole, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong, Bobby Fish was part of one of NXT's most celebrated factions. The stable dominated NXT from 2017 through 2021, winning multiple championships and putting on consistently great matches. Fish was the steady, experienced hand in the group, a former ROH World Tag Team Champion and IWGP Junior Heavyweight Tag Team Champion before WWE, with a genuine combat sports background that added credibility to his presentation. When WWE released him in August 2021, the hope was that the Undisputed Era reunion in AEW would produce something special, and for a moment it looked like it might. Fish joined AEW in October 2021, reunited with Cole and O'Reilly, and things were set up for the stable wars with the Elite that felt like it had been building for years. However, it never fully came together. Injuries, shifting storylines, and contract negotiations got in the way, and when Fish's AEW deal expired in August 2022, he moved to TNA, then to MLW, then back to the independent circuit. In October 2025, Fish suffered a hamstring injury at an indie show, had no health insurance, and revealed he was going through a divorce. He described it as the darkest period of his life, and it's a huge contrast from where he was just a few years earlier. However, Fish wasn't the only NXT alumni who fell off. Matt Riddle had all the tools, the background, the charisma, the easy likability that worked on almost anyone. And when he was paired with Randy Orton as RK Bro, it clicked. He feuded with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns during the height of the Bloodline era, and he was a part of the main event conversation. Inside the ring, he was thriving. The problem was everything outside the ring. Multiple wellness policy violations, suspensions, periods of unexplained absence. By September 2023, when WWE cut him during a round of roster releases, it felt less like a surprise and more like an overdue punishment. There were reportedly significant plans for him that were scrapped in the months before his release. Post-WWE, Riddle has had runs in MLW and TNA, but his story has largely been defined by his inability to stop making enemies. He publicly called Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn hard to work with in early 2024, which prompted immediate pushback from Owens. In summer 2025, he no-showed a UK charity event and kept his deposit. When Global Wrestling Kingdom publicly called him out, Riddle responded with a social media rant that spiraled into something far worse. He appeared on TMZ and, unprompted, called CM Punk a creep for his behavior around younger talent, and then dragged Punk's wife AJ Lee into it, implying she slept around during her career. Riddle has said he believes a WWE return is still possible, but most people who watch the fallout don't share that optimism. However, while Riddle never won the world title, this next wrestler on our list went from the heights of WrestleMania to wrestling in front of high school gyms. Alberto Del Rio was supposed to be WWE's next big Mexican star, winning the WWE Championship and the World Heavyweight Championship twice each. He won the 2011 Royal Rumble and became the first person to win both the Royal Rumble and Money in the Bank in the same year. He main-evented pay-per-views against John Cena and CM Punk, and he was a genuine top-tier star. But then came the exits. His first run ended in 2014 amid reports of a locker room altercation with an employee. He returned in 2015, won the US Championship, and was gone again by August 2016 following a wellness policy suspension. That was the last time he appeared on WWE programming. What followed was a cascade of increasingly dark headlines. His relationship with Paige became a turbulent, reportedly abusive engagement. In May 2020, he was arrested in Texas and charged with aggravated kidnapping. The charges were eventually dropped in 2021, but the damage to his reputation was done. In March 2025, at an AAA show in Tijuana, Del Rio went into the stands to confront fans who had been throwing coins at him, hurled a chair into the crowd, and in the chaos, an elderly woman was struck by a flying chair and hospitalized. The chances of Del Rio returning to WWE are close to zero. However, Del Rio isn't the only wrestler on the WWE blacklist, and if you want to know what happened to every blacklisted WWE wrestler, check out this video next.